I always say this requires a deep breath, but this one does. Time to get down to business because a new CNBC survey shows that the issue of housing is now top of mind for young voters heading into the midterms, which might not be that surprising considering home prices are at a record high and mortgage rates are at their highest we have seen in nearly a year. Joining me now, Bharat Ramamurthy, former National Economic Council Deputy Director and author of the must-read Bully Pulpit on Substack, and my dear friend and partner, Ron Insana, MS Now business analyst and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack. And if you're not following him on the Instagram, I'm just going to tell you his content is pure gold. Okay, I want to start with housing. A home is out of reach for so many people starting out, Bharat. 5 years ago, the median age for a first-time home buyer was 33. It's currently 40. More and more young people are living with their parents. How much of an impact does this have on the overall economy? When you think about as soon as people buy homes, they're now entering a totally different phase of how they're participating in our economy. That changes when they're staying home.
Yeah, absolutely. It has huge ripple effects throughout the economy. Number one, the lack of available, affordable housing in areas with good jobs and good schools means that there's an economy-wide impact if young people in particular, can't go and live in those areas. And the other thing is that in the United States, unlike some other countries, your home is the primary source of wealth. That's the way that lots of middle-class folks, lots of first-generation folks end up building wealth and then passing something on to the next generation. If we're starting that process really late, or in fact not at all for certain young people, that's going to have ripple effects down through the generations. And all of this is going to just keep widening this wealth gap that exists in the United States, where people who have owned homes, whose families have owned homes, have been able to pass it along to them, keep building more and more wealth. And those who don't have those benefits growing up are going to keep falling further and further behind.
Pending home sales are down. Home builders are not optimistic. I met the head of a children's of a summer camp this weekend that said their numbers are down because they no longer have young families moving to their communities because they simply can't afford houses. The ripple effect is real.
Well, yeah, you can't start a family if you don't have a house, right? It's very difficult to do this in an apartment. And you look at the average price of an apartment in New York City, right?
But there's not even families moving into communities where
right.
you would see this is where young families live.
Yeah, the offset is that they're building apartment communities that mirror communities that used to be houses, right? They're building amenities into these apartment complexes so that younger people could move in. You look at New York City, the average price of a one-bedroom apartment is $5,000. I've been having this conversation with my son. He said as soon as he graduates in May, he's moving south because he knows no matter how much money he makes here in New York, he'll never have the lifestyle that he had as a child. It's just not, it's so out of reach here in the Northeast and in other places like Los Angeles or where have you, that, you're looking at Sunbelt states now that are considerably less expensive. And yet, as you said, a record number of kids under 30 are back with their parents because they simply can't make those payments without a roommate or without two incomes. And even then, that's delaying family formation because they're also not having kids, which have become increasingly expensive over time.
Bharat, new topic. It sounds like the government is looking to change the way they report inflation. And the way they make these changes could end up showing that inflation is not rising as fast as it is. Tell us about what this means for consumers, but also the Fed.
Yeah, I think people may look at this a little suspiciously, but the truth is that over time, the entities in the government that track prices are going to keep updating their methods. And I don't think that there's anything particularly nefarious going on here. At the end of the day, this is about how the government measures something called core PCE, which is a measure of inflation that the Fed really likes to look at when trying to decide interest rate policy. What it isn't is a good measure of what people are feeling, in the sense that core PCE excludes both food and energy prices. And anybody out there watching will tell you that the price of food and the price of energy are pretty darn important to how they're actually experiencing the economy. So while at the end of the day, this measure may make it slightly easier for the Fed to avoid a rate increase, or maybe even make it marginally easier to cut rates, what it's not going to do is change the experience of people who are living through elevated food prices, elevated energy prices. Gas is back up to $4 a pump on average across the United States. And I think that there's going to, what you risk, the Fed risk, is being out of step with where the people are. So in other words, if they use this data to start cutting rates, that could end up surging inflation back up. And the thing that people actually experience, rising prices, gets worse and worse.
Gas prices are up because of the situation in Iran. I'm looking at the market, which is up 130. The market continues to successfully ignore the conflict in Iran, but Warren Buffett is not. I want to share just a few of his comments on the stock market. Watch this.
There are times when opportunities are just thrown at you so fast you can't, it's unbelievable. And then there's other times when you're very, very lucky if you find one thing in a couple of years. And it should always be that the latter is what prevails. But since humans love to gamble so much, there's more money in actually cultivating gamblers than there are cultivating investors.
Cheap
tough to find
opportunities.
values when everybody is preferring gambling.
Yikes.
Yeah, he said that Wall Street has become a church with a casino attached in that very same interview. And he's not wrong. When you look at Polymarket and Kalshi offering margin accounts, you can use borrowed money to make bets. You have leveraged exchange-traded funds. You can get 2 times the return if you buy those, but you can also suffer 2 times the losses. He's not right. They are sitting at Berkshire Hathaway on a $397 billion cash pile, which is a record, right?
That could be put to work. Markets are soaring, and the Oracle of Omaha is saying, I'm going to sit this one out.
And not only that, that $397 billion, Stephanie, can be used to acquire 493 of the S&P 500 companies. That's how much cash he is sitting on right now. So there is a great degree of caution at Berkshire Hathaway, and it's understandable. I mean, you have these parabolic moves in all these different semiconductor stocks, technology stocks, and so on and so forth. He's not seeing value, and that is what he's made his money on.
So I'm guessing, Bharat, and this is just a guess, Warren Buffett is not going to be signing on to pay for that early access to Trump's social media company, Truth Social, where you can potentially pay, it's now reported, potentially $100,000 a month to get early access to some of the posts, including the president's. What is your take on this? Again, I'm guessing Warren Buffett is saying no gracias.
I mean, even by the outrageous standards of corruption in this administration, I think this one may be at the top of the list. I mean, these posts on Truth Social are consistently market moving, whether it's about the war in Iran or some policy announcement or some change in view about tariff policy. If you get early access to those posts, you will be able to front run the market. It seems to me to be an absolutely crystal clear case of something that's illegal. Unfortunately, this Trump SEC, which is the entity that should be looking into something like this, has shown no interest in policing any of these types of insider trading or market moving or types of information. And so I think it'll be yet another instance, if this actually goes through, where the Trump administration, the Trump family, has found a way to make some amount of money off of the performance of their government activities. And I think we're seeing it, like I said, in the administration of tariffs, even in the conduct of a foreign conflict. We're starting to see how the corruption and the money-making desires of the Trump family and their allies is taking precedence over what's good for the American people.
And again, we're out of time, but I just want to be sure I clarify for our audience again. Money making and trading is very different from long-term investing. So you could say, well, those Truth Social posts, they're not even true. He doesn't even enact those policies, or what he says might not even happen. That might all be the case, but it moves markets. And if you can get that information early and markets move, you can make a whole lot of money in a very short amount of time. And that raises big, big questions. Bharat, thank you. Ron, always great.